Jeff Greenberg, as we stay in the ACC, is joining us from inside the ACC to talk some North Carolina football and Larry Fedora's class of 21. Jeff, how you doing tonight?
Good, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So we discussed what it looked like the class was going to shape into just a few weeks ago. Your thoughts about where we stood a couple weeks ago and how this class shaked out in the closing days?
Well, it held true to what we talked about last week. And the one player they were waiting to hear about was Daz Newsome, the number one cornerback out of Virginia, who did end up going with the Tar Heels. He had decommitted from Maryland on his official visit, and it was basically down to UNC and Virginia Tech, and he went with the Tar Heels. So that was a big pickup. Everything else kind of fell into line as expected. The class finished up, depending on the service you look at, top 25 to top 30, top 5 in the ACC. Coach Fedora described it as a very athletic group of guys across multiple positions. The staff really feels like it's what they call a cornerstone class that's diverse, that could be the next foundation piece. The same way they talked about Ryan Switzer and Mitch Trubisky's class, that's what they're looking at with this class. And they have 5 4-star players, which is the second most in the Fedora era. They actually spread their net a little wider, went to 9 different states for this one. Half the players still were from North Carolina and Georgia. They got the top 4 players, or 4 out of the top 10 players in North Carolina. Everybody else went out of state, so they were able to secure in-state guys that they're really trying to push for. They reached into Tennessee, got 3 guys, which is more than the last 7 years combined. So again, their net went a little wider. In terms of focus areas, offensive line and defensive back. Offensive line, they literally wanted to go after a complete line, and they did get 5 guys that they're excited about. The 5 guys together come together and weigh about 1,500 pounds between the 5 of them, anchored by 2 6'6", 320-pound tackles in Jordan Tucker and Marcus McKeithen. And then we talked about last time, they got the number 1 player out of North Carolina, number 10 guard in the nation, Jonah Melton. So that really locked up that offensive line portion. Some guys to keep an eye on that we mentioned last time: Jake Lawler, the number 1 defensive end out of North Carolina. Trey Shaw is a 4-star guy out of Georgia who actually UNC beat a lot of the SEC teams in that area that were going after him. And then Michael Carter is a guy to keep an eye on with the need at running back. He was Mr. Florida in the 6A classification, 3,000 plus all-purpose yards, 45 touchdowns this season. Coach Fedora said he reminds him a lot of Gio Bernard. You'll see him. He's already an early enrollee, so you'll see him hit the field a lot, I think, this year. So those were some of the highlights. Again, with the coach thinking this is a cornerstone class. They took 21 total. They picked up another transfer running back this week from Auburn, but the school can't officially announce those, but he did. The player did. And Coach Fedora said that they've got a little more room, and I think they're working on 3 or 4 more guys that could possibly transfer in, either as a grad transfer or a transfer.
Hey, Jeff, if we put the recruiting rankings in context of the competition, things can possibly change, or the perspective can change. So if we go to the Coastal Division circa 2012 or 13, you're looking at Duke maybe being the best team in the division, and Miami's on probation, and Virginia Tech slogging along at 7-6 a couple consecutive years. And just spin it ahead a couple years, and the division has really taken a step up across the board. Almost every program is better than it was just a couple years ago. So a top 25 to 30 class looked really good a couple years ago. Now it's still a good class, but it's kind of just treading water versus the competition.
Yeah, I think the division as a whole, when you look at it, you've got new coaches that injected a lot of excitement. You've got Justin Fuente at Virginia Tech, had a great first year. You have Mark Richt at Miami, who's always having great recruiting success, and now he's doing it in the hotbed in Florida. So I would look at it in the terms of with the bump you usually get from a first-year coach and the excitement around that, like Virginia Tech and Miami did, for UNC to hold serve, stay within reach of those guys, especially Virginia Tech and North Carolina's class are pretty interchangeable. Miami, again, I think you're going to see Mark Richt do that year in and year out and have top 15 classes. It's not historically irregular for Miami, and you add Mark Richt's recruiting prowess there, and it's not surprising. But staying in the range of those 2 guys in the Coastal Division is what Larry Fedora needs to do at North Carolina to keep his foothold and be in the race for the Coastal Division year in and year out.
Jeff Greenberg, one of our top contributors here for the last few years here on Mark Rogers TV. Jeff, we always appreciate the time. You can join Jeff on Inside the ACC, and he has a weekly conversation. There's not a whole lot of guys that can say this across the nation with a major college football coach, meaning Larry Fedora, each and every week. So it's not just run-of-the-mill X's and O's. They delve into some interesting topics concerning the coach's perspective on football, on recruiting, on all sorts of things, even away from the football field. So, Jeff, we appreciate the time.
Thanks, Mark. Always.